Into
The
this.
ceremonial work we do with medicines is very brutal. It can be very intense. It can be
This
it's
is
the most beautiful experience.
this is
It
me,
the most
seriously.
beautiful experience of our lives, but also it can be immense suffering. But our threshold
Suffering
for
with meaning.
suffering
Yes.
meaning,
Mm-hmm.
and now we can listen to the pain. We can feel into it and listen and transmute it into what it's trying to teach us, as opposed to resisting and being stuck in this tug of war with this information that's being translated through emotions. I want to speak to this for a second. So
Here we go.
we were telling you off air that the first show we did was on psychedelic medicine. Tony directed it. I hosted it.
This
It's
is
called
me.
Awaken Underground. It was just
Listen.
on psychedelic medicines, and it told the story through my eyes because I was medicated. I was stuck on ADHD medicine as a kid. So the first episode was called The Medication Generation, and it's pretty much about what happens when you medicate a kid. And that journey of being rotated from drug to drug to drug. I mean, people hear my story and they think like the drugs weren't a good time, or they like the drugs were effective, but the model was so flawed. And so you were speaking about ketamine, about glutamate, and that it was like this flood of glutamate,
This is why I
and
want
that
off
could
my
sort of
meds.
like unblocks,
But
or
we
on a
don't know how.
psychedelic could be a flood of dopamine or serotonin, right? And it sort of unblocks you. Well, the pharmaceutical model is an addiction model. It
Right.
had me taking it every single day. And what it does is, if it's acting on your serotonin, your dopamine, your glutamate, eventually you stop producing it because it's relying on the
Right.
drug.
And that's how it works.
Exactly.
It has to work
and
that way.
then you need more.
And then you need
more.
to switch drugs.
Right.
Switch
Yep.
drugs.
And then maybe you put a second one in.
Yeah, you
Then
need
a
to add
second
one.
And then maybe a
Yep.
third one.
Exactly.
And now you can't sleep, so let's add
Yep.
some sleep medicine.
Exactly.
And now
It's
you
a-
can't get up in the morning. Let's
Yep.
add something else.
You
And
said
those-
it's a great business model.
And the pharmaceuticals just mask a problem. So we like to think of it as we go into these medicine ceremonies, it almost feels like we're like filled with flow. Like it feels like our body, everything's kind of starting to actually move again, where there was blockages or something like that. Even if there's like a pain or there's a trauma or there's hurt or whatever it may be, emotional or mental, whatever, it doesn't matter. It creates fluidity inside of our brains and our bodies. The problem with pharmaceuticals is that they blanket it, they mask it, it's like pretend it's not there, but then it's still there underneath the
Yeah,
blanket.
exactly.
So the
Yep.
person's still suffering with it, which is causing disease in their body.
Yep.
There's no fluidity in there. And that to me is like the most heartbreaking thing is I have like my aunt is on depression medication and she's like, I can't live without it. And part of me just wants to be like, well, but you could also, maybe we could work with mushrooms or
I can't live without it because this is the big capacity of my affective experience.
yeah.
Because if I'm too scared to expand
Yep.
my affective tolerance, right? So this is where I have to live.
So you're saying, because for our listeners, affective, what does that word mean?
So affect is your feeling, right? Is your ability to tolerate feeling. So if I have no tolerance for affect, it means I can't tolerate feeling.
Mhm.
I live in a state of no feeling. I'm numb. So in order to be healthy, what we know now, what you know now, is like you have to have greater affective tolerance so that you can tolerate the joy, you can tolerate the depression or sadness, right? And what the pharmaceutical industry has done is made that affective window really, really narrow, so that it gives you the capacity to numb, so you don't have to feel those things. But what we want to do is expand the capacity for the window for affect gets much, much bigger and more tolerant and more adventurous, more open. Like that you can feel a lot of things and you
You
can
can
feel
live.
you
Alright, go
can
blur.
have
I
right,
mean,
you
that
can
you
live
live 'cause-
complexity
yeah.
and not have it kill you.
It's like what you were saying with one of your patients, how with OCD, right? He was able to go back and be like, oh, I was taught steps.
That's actually a
How to do it.
study. That wasn't
Oh,
one of
no,
my
no,
patients.
oh,
That
your
was one of the
patient's
studies.
study.
That was one of the studies.
But that's
Yeah.
something with psychedelics is that no matter what it is that is teaching you, it goes into your psyche and it literally shows you steps on why the trauma is
Yeah.
happening, what the feeling is, how to process it, everything. So what you're saying is the feeling of being able to feel a lot of joy, but also a lot of pain. But you're not just, it's
Keep
not
them
the
blurry.
pain you're sitting and suffering in. It's a pain that you're like, I can see it, I can move through it, and you know the process of it.
Yeah, and one of the things about that, so that we know from therapy. So one of the types of therapy that I do, that we both do, is called acceptance commitment therapy, ACT. And one of the primary pieces of ACT is that you want to drop resistance. You want to help your client drop their resistance to feel things. And that pairs perfectly with psychedelic therapy, because the whole idea is like what ACT teaches is that the resistance is the problem. If you think about how people hurt themselves if they're in a car accident or if they fall off a horse, like I ride horses, right? The first thing you learn when you learn to ride horses is how to fall off without breaking something, because it's the resistance that is going to hurt you. So what happens is in psychedelics, people by nature have to drop their resistance because the default mode network goes offline. So then you don't have any resistance anymore. You're just having experience. And that is part of the research too of Robin Carhart Harris up in San Francisco. You go to a more primal part, brain function, if you will. The DMN is offline. That's the part of the brain or the network in the brain that is responsible for rumination and OCD. And when that one's offline, you can make connections. You can do more with your brain. We want our clients to have either a training in how to take the DMN offline, or we want to help with their neurotransmitter system so that they don't have to give in to that default mode network telling them, no, worry some more. Hey, how about some more worry? Yeah, do a little more worry over here. Yeah, take that offline, and suddenly you have no more resistance and you have more capacity for healing.
I was diagnosed with severe OCD, severe ADHD, dyslexia, and OCD. And it was like, I didn't know, because I was diagnosed way later in life. I was like 28 years old when I was diagnosed with any of this stuff. My psychiatrist literally said, how did you graduate high school? And I was like, I graduated college. Like, you know,
underdiagnosed in women.
Underdiagnosed in women, for sure. But working with psychedelics, it gave me tools to be able to process what was happening.
Yeah.
Because even if I still felt it like coming up, I could sense it and I can go, okay, hold on.
Right.
I feel that it's coming up, and I could process what was going on, and I could move through it, which before
That's
I
it,
couldn't
honey.
move through
Yeah,
it.
That's exactly it. Because your default mode network was not over engaged.
Because the
Because you
meds
expanded.
numb us.
I want to push this into the mystical, but it's so important. What
All
you're
right, there's
talking
tons
about,
more,
getting to the
but
science, 'cause this
I
is
just
what's
wanted you
really
guys to all
resonating
hear
with
that
me.
part.